Three. Hi, Andrew. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, friends, here is Andrew Astin, and let me introduce you about Andrew. So, friends, Andrew is a therapist with a background in neurosurgery and clinical neurology. With a busy private practice in West Sussex, England, Andrew has a specialist interested in the schizophrenia. So I will ask more about it to Andrew in a while, and has been heavily influenced by the writings of notables such as R.D. Laing and Thomas Szasz. Very early in his nurse training, he began to learn about hypnosis rather than attend lectures, and soon joined a Kabbalistic lodge in order to learn ceremonial magic and Kabbalah. And Andrew also traveled in India and Nepal, and a student of yoga and Kabbalah. Andrew enjoys lively conversation and hot curries. So that's Andrew for us, and he's also the founder of Metaphors of Movement and Integral Eye Movement Therapy. So let's know more about these modalities from Andrew itself. So, Andrew, what is this IEMT?
This started off as a little idea that I wanted to play with a little bit. I was aware of EMDR, so I was already familiar with EMDR, and that was through colleagues at the hospital. At the time, I was working in neurosurgery, and I was astonished at the skill set of some of the doctors and a lot of the nurses that I worked with. Not in the skill set in neurosurgery, because they were all amazing, not that. Their skill set in measuring people and what was wrong with them. So essentially, I started to learn stuff about neurology and about what the eyes were doing that wasn't taught in things like EMDR, and it wasn't taught in NLP. And I started to put together this little experiment. The experiment would last for about 2 hours, and I started teaching this in little groups. Let's see what happens when we do this particular thing. And people started to ask questions, and they would ask me questions I didn't know, and I think, oh, I need to go and find out. So I go and find out, and then that would add a little bit more information in. And then the 2 hours became 3 hours, became 4 hours. And then as time went on, before I knew it, I had a 2-day and then 4-day and then additional material. So it grew bigger than I actually ever planned. I never meant it to become what it became. So now the question is, what is it? It's simple. It's a way of using neurology, particularly through the eyeballs, to change psychology. So we're using applied neurological process to change psychological process, which in turn changes how you feel.
Wow.
But we're not directly working with feelings. That's the mistake everyone makes. We're not working with feelings. We're working with neurology to affect psychology in order to affect feelings, which are the consequence of the work that we do.
Okay.
I can summarize all the training for you in a very quick way. Think of a memory, move your eyes. There you go. There's the whole training in a nutshell.
Okay. So,
but if you move your eyes in very specific ways, we start to get some very interesting phenomena. And so that's in a nutshell, that's what this is. We're exploring some of this unusual phenomena.
Okay. So interesting. Then how is it different from EMDR?
What I like to say to people is that they're exactly the same model. IEMT, EMDR, they're exactly the same because they use eye movements.
Okay.
In exactly the same way that Freudian psychoanalysis is exactly the same as Richard Bandler's NLP, because they both use words. Now, the reality is there is no comparison between the two models.
Okay.
For sure, IEMT came out of some of the EMDR concepts. That's a given. But actually, in terms of the model, they are so diversely different. I can't really tell you how they're different, because it would be like describing how an orange is different from a giraffe.
Okay.
Because they're not the same, how can I
Yes.
even begin to tell you the differences? Because they're not the same.
Yes.
And herein lies the problem. I have a lot of people who tell me they're exactly the same.
Okay.
And I'll say, okay, have you trained in the EMDR? They say no. And then I'll say, have you trained in IEMT? They go no.
Okay.
Are you familiar with any of the models at all? No. And yet you think they're the same? Oh yes. So how do
That
I begin with that?
answers.
So
Okay.
the only way I could tell you what the differences are is to teach you EMDR, which I'm not licensed to do, and then teach you IEMT, and then you could see the difference. The only similarity they have is they use eye movements. And it would be like saying EMDR is exactly the same as EFT, because as you know, EFT uses eye movements. They're not the same model. So therein lies the difficulty. I still have people tell me they're the same model. I've got a leading NLP master trainer who's telling me that because EMDR came from an original concept of John Grinder, and because IEMT is ripping off EMDR, therefore I have plagiarized John Grinder with IEMT.
Oh my God. Okay.
So I wrote to John, and I've sent him an email to say, John, I understand the concept of what you wrote that inspired Francine Shapiro with her EMDR work. Where in IEMT am I reproducing that?
Okay.
Because I'm not aware of anywhere in IEMT that in any way looks like that model, or in any way looks like that description of how you inspired EMDR. I haven't had a reply, and yet I still have new code trainers accuse me.
Okay.
That's fantastic. Great,
Yeah.
guys. Show me the evidence.
Good way to get promotion.
Yeah, it's. Well, I don't know
Just
what
kidding,
sort of
Andrew.
promotion they're giving themselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work as a promotion. So are they the same? No, they're clearly not the same.
Yes.
However, if you ask some very uninformed people who've never had a conversation with me, never attended the training, haven't read any of the product, any of the videos or gone through the videos, they will tell you they're exactly the same.
Okay. So, what are the various applications of IEMT?
Now, herein lies a problem. And I'm aware that there's lots of practitioners and trainers to a degree as well, who will tell you that IEMT can be used to treat X, Y, Z conditions. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but that is not how I constructed the work, and nor is it how I ever apply the work. You see, just because you have a diagnosed condition or you have a problem that has a label doesn't mean this condition, so this treatment process, this model of therapy is going to cure that condition. And there's nowhere in my work where I think in those terms. What I'm doing is I'm using a model to work with you, the human being, and make your life better.
Okay.
We're not applying it to a condition as such. Now, because I don't really recognize psychiatric descriptions, I don't recognize psychiatric labels as being genuine conditions. What they are is a collection of people's behaviors. They're a collection of attributes a person may possess, which disregard the entire person and every other facet and aspects of their personality and human experience. We're only focusing on the bits that validate the diagnosis. Doesn't mean the diagnosis is legitimate. And therefore I can't cure that. The only person that can cure the diagnosis is the person that made the diagnosis in the first place, since they created it. So if you have a set of problems and we apply these processes to you, the person, then you may feel better and you may interpret that as saying this condition has gone away or improved, if that makes sense. So that is how I reason. That is how I think in terms of the work that I'm doing. In alternative or complementary therapies, they would say I'm a holistic practitioner. I look at the whole person, but I don't even recognize holistic treatment either, because I think that is another fabrication that people have come up with. It's just not in my model of thinking. However, what are the kind of things, the typical things people present to the IMT practitioner? Depression and anxiety. And I would say 99% of all problems that people present are going to be depression or anxiety related at some level. However, I mean, we've got to be honest, I've just said I don't recognize diagnosis. Phobias, this works extremely well with. And I mean, excellent results with simple phobias, or actually complex phobias too. Essentially, what we're working with, when life has screwed you up, because stuff happens, stuff has happened to you, stuff goes on, and life is problematic to a lot of people. That is the kind of stuff that the IEMT works on. When we're looking at the person themselves is screwing up their life, as opposed to the other way around, then I'm going to use other approaches. So essentially, this is life's traumas. This is what IEMT will work for.
Okay, thank you, Anu. And EMDR can be learned only by mental health professionals. So for IEMT, is there any mandatory that someone with psychology degree or any mental health professional can only learn?
No, the way I've organized the training, this is not a therapy unto itself. So essentially, you can learn IEMT in 2 days. You're learning how to do IEMT. Does that make a person a therapist? Nope. Does it make them a coach? Nope. Does it give them qualification? Nope. Does it give them anything at all? Nope. But it teaches them IEMT. And so I've had to be very clear with what we're doing with the training. This is a model of work. It's a very simple model of work that anyone can learn. And so it's available to anybody. About a third of the people that attend training are therapists of some description. About a third are people with problems who are looking for help. And about a third are therapists with problems looking for personal development. And then, of course, there's the people who do recreational education. So they're doing courses because it's a fun thing to do. It's a weekend away, that kind of stuff. So there's no prerequisite for attending an IEMT training. However, there is a requisite for getting a certificate.
Okay.
It's not a case of just turn up on the course and, hey, here's the certificate. Get out there and change the world. You have to submit yourself to be assessed, to actually demonstrate competence with the work, and then join the Association for IEMT Practitioners, which then basically will, assuming you pass and you're accepted as a member, because there have been some people I have rejected, then now you are allowed to practice IEMT. And then we have some very strict guidelines as to what you can and can't do with it. So it's a case of, yes, anyone can learn it, but we do have some kind of quality control as to the people who can practice it.
Oh, okay. That gives a clear idea now. And is IEMT evidence-based therapy?
I would love to be able to sit here and say, yep, we've got all the research, we can prove it works, it's fantastic. No, there is no evidence that would stand up in a court of law. There is no evidence that we would be able to submit to a scientific journal. Now, this is a limitation, and I've got to be realistic here. We are currently working on research, and I'm just about to employ a research team to start. Oh, what happened? And I'm back. I'm about to employ a research team who are working through the proposals at the moment to start on the research. The research we're looking at is at 2 levels. One is the presuppositions of IEMT, which are things like the patterns of chronicity, which is the central piece. Do they exist? We talk about some of the phenomena that the eye movements create as a way of calibrating what we're doing. Is that phenomena real? Does it really happen? Now, I know it is, and the practitioners and trainers know it is, but we don't have the scientific research. So at one level, we're going to be doing research on gathering evidence and proof that the presuppositions of the model are correct and they exist. Once that is complete, we're then going to be looking at the efficacy. So then, unfortunately, we have to pick conditions that I don't believe are real, in order, because the scientific community believe they are. So we'll pick things like depression, anxiety, trauma. And then measure people before and after application of IEMT to the condition, and then measure, okay, is this process efficacious in helping those people with those conditions? So this is, unfortunately, this is going to be quite long term, and it's also colossally expensive. But that will be underway any day now. It is literally something we are working on at this very time. So that will start very soon.
Okay. So, Andrew, I practice something called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. So there we also use eye movements. But my question of how moving our eyes in certain patterns is helping a person to overcome it. It could be sadness, it could be grief, or any emotional issue. What is the connection of this eye movement and emotions, or how? What is the science behind? I haven't got my answer yet. So could you please
How
tell me,
much
like,
time have
eye
we got?
movement?
All right, you're getting me onto one of my favorite subject matters. Just stop me if I get carried away. I will try and keep this brief. All right, so as you can imagine, our eyeballs might be a very, very small part of our body, yet visual information is incredibly important to how we function. And so enormous areas of the brain are dedicated to processing visual information. And when we don't have the opportunity for vision, so people are blind, those structures basically reinterpret other sensory data and construct it accordingly. So blind people live in a three-dimensional world, which is extraordinary how they process information. Now, the way we move our eyes, we've got a number of ways they line up. So they line up in this axis for focus, they line up in this axis, and in this axis too. Okay. All right. So this is what I saw the neurosurgeons able to do. They were moving a pen around, saying to in assessing a patient with a tumor, follow the pen, and they're looking for where they don't converge. Are they converging correctly in this axis, and in this axis? Because a tumor will displace the optic nerves that are quite big in the brain, and that causes a shift in how the eyes align or misalign with each other. This would enable them to get a pretty good measurement as to what type of tumor, where the tumor was, how long it had been. There's all sorts of things they could ascertain. It was amazing. Now, there's 6 nerves around the eye, 6 muscles around the eye. Each has its own particular nerve or a nerve that then innervates to more than one muscle. One of those is called the trochlear nerve. The trochlear nerve enables you to lift your eyes up. Okay, if you paralyze the trochlear nerve, your eyes drop. That's why it's called the pathetic nerve. And so there's a weird thing. If you Botox the frown muscles in a depressive, they can't frown because Botox paralyzes the frown muscles, right? Okay. As a result, they feel better in absence of any other intervention. So we now know that some people with Botox to their frown muscles will, because they can't frown, they will begin to change their mood. Now, with access any memory of any event and your eyes go, doop, right? Yes. Why? Because you're looking at the memory. You can't access the memory by looking somewhere else. Because if you look somewhere else, you access something else. Okay. So what we're doing with eye movements is largely getting you to access the memory and then do something else. Access the memory, do something else. Now, some people might like to go, ooh, you're collapsing anchors. Visual anchor of memory, that's an internal representation, and matching it to something else. That would be incorrect, but I can understand why people would interpret things that way. It also appears the way the trochlear nerve, because here's the thing, if you paralyze that with Botox and people look down, guess what? They start to get a bit depressed. So what we're starting to do is we're changing the way these nerves are sending signals into the brain relative to the visual representation the person has. This is how I discovered the IEMT model, what became the IEMT model. When I was playing with what I understood of EMDR, it didn't work on emotions, and it didn't work on anticipated experience. So if a person is anxious about something tomorrow, and I get them to think about the thing tomorrow and move their eyes, it didn't work. And that bothered me. Why? If it was something that's yesterday and they move their eyes, it seems to work extremely well. But why doesn't it work on anticipated experience? It only works on memory. What happens when I get people to think about the emotion and move their eyes? Nothing seems to happen, but it does change when they remember how they felt. But simply feeling it in the present time doesn't work, but remembering how you felt a time before does work. So it works on memory of emotion, not on the emotion directly. So that's what I discovered. Now, I thought that was significant. I remember phoning my mum. I think I was about 26. I was working in brain surgery. Mum, I found something. I've discovered something. And I explained this to her. My mum, who has no awareness of any of this stuff at all, it's like, oh, that's nice, dear. How are you keeping? Have you had lunch? It's like, no, Mum, you don't understand how important this is. Of course you couldn't possibly, and no one did. At the neurosurgical department, I'm telling everybody, you have no idea what I've discovered. This is really significant. People are going, yeah, that's nice, Andy. Go and have some lunch.
Okay.
So essentially what we have is a model of eye movements that change the coding of memory. And when we change how we remember how we feel, we have better memories. Because if all we have memory of is trauma, then naturally we're going to anticipate more trauma further down the line. But if we are eliminating those traumas or those emotional traumas through our memory bank, then we start to become much more in the present. And we don't have to keep protecting ourselves from past hurts. And then we can learn and develop and so forth. So essentially, it seems to be the trochlear nerve does something to how the memory is encoded in the hippocampus, a part of the brain. The EMDR people will tell you that eye movements change the relationship of memory in the amygdala. I have no evidence for this. That I am going to claim IEMT is a hippocampal action. It does not work on the amygdala. It works on the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is much more involved in memory than it is, and amygdalas are much more involved in emotional discrimination. It changes the relationship of the hippocampus. And when we change how we remember feeling, we change how we feel, which then in turn can change how we anticipate feeling. And it appears to be the trochlear nerve, but I've got no evidence for this whatsoever until they give me some millions and millions of dollars to own a suite of MRI scanners with functional MRI scans and a whole team of people who know how to do it and a research team and all these people and clinicians and everyone who can run the whole thing. Then I've got no way of proving that. It's all just a theory which could be completely made up by my imagination, and it has no truth to it whatsoever.
So now I'm getting a basic idea about it. Maybe and in a practitioner training can help to understand the science more about it. It's a whole science altogether, Andrew. It's very fascinating.
I'm going to claim this though. It's a science that is probably complete fiction until we have proof.
Yes. My
background, I was a nurse. And a large area of my work as a nurse was in neurology and in neurosurgery. Mm-hmm. My clinical experience, my first-hand, hands-on experience of neurology and the brain is huge. Not as huge as the people that work there full-time and have worked there for 20 years, but compared to the average therapist and practitioner, it's huge. It's minuscule compared to any of my former colleagues who still work there. Just to give it make it relative. Yes. I despair when I hear therapists talking about neurology, because the stuff that they say, the stuff that they talk about is usually 100% incorrect, but they're repeating what they have heard other therapists say. And these things become cliches that people learn to say because they hear other people saying it. Yes. And actually there's very, very little truth to it at all. And that most stuff that passes as neurology is mere urban myth. And now I'm immediately slightly worried about all the stuff I've just said, because that's probably completely untrue as well. And if my former colleagues were to hear my description of what I've just given, they'll probably go, Austin, you're just making shit up. Yeah, I could be. And so herein lies the problem. The moment we start thinking we're being scientific, we're probably being more metaphorical than we are scientific.
It works, that's fine.
That'll do. That's good. That's good enough.
Yes. And Andrew, what is metaphors of movement?
Now, metaphors of movement was the development of the more advanced levels of IEMT. So IEMT has eye movements and the patterns of chronicity, and then it moves into identity.
Mhm.
As I began to develop more advanced work around the identity work of IEMT, it moved much more into metaphorical work. Now, originally that was incorporated into the IEMT work. And then I recorded one of my workshops, and when I watched it back, I realized that the eye movements in that workshop were the least important aspect, because I was doing much more metaphor. This was one of the many things that happened. The other thing was I met up with Charles Faulkner, who, having spent the better part of a day with him, completely blew my mind. And it took me about a year to work out what he said to me. And that work of working out what he said to me became metaphors of movement. And so with that, I separated the two models. We had the eye movements, I took out all the metaphor stuff, and then that became metaphors of movement, which then developed over a period of time. What this is a way of paying attention to the unconscious communication of metaphor that people have. And these are really your unconscious maps of the world. You'll find parallels in this area with things like clean language of James Lawley and Penny Tompkins. So they're also exploring the same domain. We have Mike Mandel, who's doing his mindscaping, also exploring the same domain. But these are three very different models of doing the same thing.
Okay.
Probably not doing the same thing. Exploring the same domain is probably the accurate thing I should have said. So there's lots of, and there's going to be other models as well, metaphor. So essentially, metaphors seem to be an unconscious process that govern conscious processes, which is why when we look at metaphors, people largely dismiss them as being a figure of speech. Oh, it's just something I said, it's not real. It's just a figure of speech. But when we start to analyze these metaphors, we find it's an incredibly information-dense way of exploring the unconscious world that we all have inside us. The metaphors of movement is largely used to explore you and how you act upon your life. IEMT is looking about how life has acted upon you. To that end, metaphors of movement is generative change work. IEMT is remedial change work, if that makes sense. So that's where the separation of the two models exists. And so this is a way of exploring linguistic references, metaphorical references that people have, and discovering the stuff that you're not conscious of, and yet you communicate it constantly. Yes. And it's a way of interpreting that communication in ways that will, well, change your life, really.
And I was going through metaphors of movement levels, and it is evolving and evolving and evolving. You are adding more and more deeper work. So it really went much deeper. And
I'm working on a project at the moment with metaphors. I'm going into greater level of application. So I'm looking at schizophrenia and psychotic communication. Because anyone who's worked with schizophrenia or psychosis, delusional communication, where people are giving you stuff that is absolutely crazy, doesn't sound any different to me than people's metaphors. Because when you start examining people's metaphors, often people go, I don't, this makes me sound a bit weird, makes me sound crazy. And I go, yes. And it sounds exactly like psychotic communication. So now what I'm doing is I'm working on a project, working with a number of schizophrenics as well with this, in analyzing the interviews and the communication patterns to examine delusional and psychotic communications as metaphor, and what do we find underneath those metaphors. Now, what I have found in this work is that they are no different. The only difference I can find with people diagnosed schizophrenic is they don't filter their metaphors to the ones that everyone else uses. You see, what most of us do is we adjust our communication to fit the social norms and the cultural norms of what everyone else says. The schizophrenic doesn't filter that. They just tell you their metaphors factually. The analogy I have with this is if I've drunk too much alcohol, and then, which I don't drink, but imagine I've drunk too much alcohol, and the next day I'm feeling really hungover. To be hungover is a metaphor. I'm not literally being hung over something. I'm not hanging. But because everyone uses that expression of hangover, we know what the person means. But when the psychotic uses communication like that, we think they're being literal, therefore they're delusional. So you and I, as non-diagnosed people, can talk figuratively without being taken literally. But a person who is deemed to be psychotic, they're always deemed to be speaking literally when they're being metaphorical and figurative. And so what happens when we take what we think is literal communication and deem it to be metaphoric? Let me give you another example. Heartburn. So I might have had too much spicy food and I've got heartburn. My heart is not on fire. I'm being figurative. It's not even a metaphor, it's figurative. But when the psychotic says that, they're going to be much more literal with their metaphor, which no one thinks is figurative. So that's what I'm currently decoding. That's what I'm working on. So there's more and more and more stuff we can look at with this metaphor stuff.
That's the reason it's evolving.
Sorry?
That's the reason it's evolving a lot.
Yeah. And there's 11 levels. I've only taught the first the first 5 so far. Level 6 is the next one to be taught. And then there's 11 in total. And so there's still more to be revealed to the public yet.
And Andrew, is it possible to learn IEMT online?
Yeah, this is one of those things. Can you learn it? I don't know. Can you teach it? I don't know. Here's what we have. This is the situation we have. Because of Corona, a number of our trainers have been delivering the courses online. So it's live online. And so far, the results seem to be very good.
Okay.
The feedback has been excellent. The assessments have been effective. So what people are showing in terms of their work, what they've learned, seems to be holding up. So it seems to be working well. I've got the recordings of the training I gave in New York, which we had professionally filmed. That's available on the website. People can learn it there. Whether they will be able to reproduce it, I don't know. So what I've done is we've made a rule that yes, people can teach this online, people can learn it online, but only if it's taught live and it has the assessment component to it. It's not one of those ones you can just watch the videos and go,
watch the video and get certified.
Which people ask me, like at least once a month, somebody writes to me, I bought your online training and I'd like a certificate. And I go, no. Wrong with these people?
A lot of NLP and a lot of courses are there. You watch a video, 10-set video, and you are certified NLP practitioner and master practitioner. So IEMT can be learned online, but provided it is a live training.
And I've just got to throw this in there as well. The only people that can teach this are the people who are on the approved trainers list on the website.
How do we know who is authorized trainer?
If you go to integraliMovementTherapy.com and look at approved trainers, only those people are licensed to train this. Every week, I get an email from someone to ask me, this person is running a course, is clearly your material, and I've never heard of that person.
Oh my God.
Every single week there's another one. And then it's Monday today. Before Thursday, I'll have another one that somebody will send to me. And it's somebody I've never heard of. They're not approved. They've just ripped the material and are then professing. I've had somebody else I exposed 2 weeks ago who's basically claiming they developed it. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Now, this is a person I had heard of. But so there's a lot of that around. So I would urge anyone who's looking at training in this, if you want to go off and learn it from somebody who probably doesn't know what they're doing, go ahead. But don't come to us and ask for membership of the association or a certificate or with any complaints about the trainer. If they're not on the approved trainers list, they're nothing to do with us, and they should be shunned by all humanity for the parasites that they are. And there's a lot of them out there.
And Andrew, like NLP has practitioner, master practitioner, and trainer level. For IEMT also, are there any different levels?
No, we've got, because we've got to balance the business marketing aspect with the logistical training aspect. We've got pretty much two levels. There's the practitioner training. Now that was all of the work. That is the IMT work. But then as time went on, of course, there were observations and things we learned along the way. And so the advanced practitioner, which is typically 2 days, it might be longer depending on who's training and how they're organizing it. The advanced practitioner is really looking at the more in depth at the structure of the training that they have undertaken. And that's it. I'm never going to run a trainer's training again.
Oh.
The reason I stopped the trainer's training and I cancelled the last one that I was doing, simply because the majority of people that were booking on the trainer's training were booking on it for the wrong reasons. You see, the association, our practitioners, our trainers work extremely hard at quality control, making sure the quality of delivery of the work is very good. We're working towards getting authentic qualification rather than just certification. People adhere to all the standards of ethics and everything else. The people who were booking on the training course, I had just to give you an idea, the last time it was going to run, 6 of them were already advertising the trainings they were going to be running before they had attended the training. And it's like, guys, you don't even know the logistics of what. It's not a case of you're just going to turn up, get a certificate, and then you can go and train it and make lots of money. But that's what they were thinking they would do. So I cancelled the training, and interestingly, most of those people went on to do it anyway. And they didn't worry about the ethics or logistics or anything else. And of course, the amount of trouble that has happened as a result of that for them has been quite impressive. It's been interesting to see how many, because they clearly are corrupt. And corrupt people don't tend to do so well when they're on their own. And so I don't want to flood the market with trainers, which is why I'm not going to run a training course. But also, I'm only going to pick people myself on a one-to-one basis.
Okay.
They will be, it's by invitation only, so I can maintain the quality control. We've got excellent trainers, and I don't want to basically dilute what they're doing, but also compromise what they're doing because of the quality that we've got.
So after this pandemic, are you coming to India, Andrew?
I hope so. If I'm allowed. Yeah, the plan is to do a lot more stuff in India. I'm working with the charity in Delhi, the homeless charity. So I want to do some more stuff with them. We're also looking at doing some work in Mumbai as well, and potentially down south too. It all comes down to if we survive the apocalypse, and we'll see what happens. Who knows? At the moment, I'm not booking any dates for anything, because we keep being talked about this second wave, the third wave, and further lockdowns. And I'm just going to wait until all this is over and then replan accordingly. But as you probably know, India is largely my second home. I've been a visitor to India a lot. I'm on my 4th passport as an adult, simply because there's so many Indian visa stamps all the way through my passports. I'm now on passport number 4. Because I fill the pages, and 90% of those visa stamps are for India. I don't know how many times I've been. So I regard India as my second home. And so I plan to be back there as soon as I can.
Nice to know. So Andrew, you are founder of IEMT, founder of Metaverse of Movement. You are still saying if we survive, but there are so many, online few NLPers who claim to cure COVID. So what is your stand on that?
It's a logistical problem of therapists. who are constantly moving with current trends. They're trying to stay relevant and they're competing with each other. And I was a nurse. I started my nurse training in 1989 and I qualified in 92. I started as learning hypnosis as a student. I took my first hypnotherapy course in 1994 and I've been working in that field ever since. Over the years, I have seen every trend come and go and every trend of marketing claims. I'm seeing lots and lots of people make claims for COVID. The internet is flooded with every type of therapist, not just NLPers, but every type of therapist, making a video how to cope with COVID-19 stress, how to cope with COVID-19 anxiety. Because that was the trend. Everyone wanted to get in on the action because they're all competing with each other, because there's tens of thousands of them out there and there's not that many clients. They're all competing. I was horrified when a neuropsychologist colleague sent me the screenshot from a leading new code NLP trainer in the UK, who was not just claiming to be able to prevent COVID infection, but was telling people to ignore government advice on COVID prevention. The wording was along the lines of, only through new code NLP will you learn how to install an unconscious viral filter to filter out this virus.
Wow.
Now, to me, that goes into the domain of criminal negligence. This isn't just people making boastful claims. This isn't people just changing the truth a little bit to fit their marketing needs. This is outright criminal negligence. And I reported that. I sent that off to the relevant authorities to say, holy, you need to have a look at this. And I immediately received a legal letter, a legal threat from the person making those claims, because apparently to be naming them and shaming them in this way is defamation. And so that's something I'm not entirely unfamiliar with. Yes. The negligence and the criminality of people trying to make money. The medicine show, the old age healers who would tell you to rub mercury metal into your eyes to cure leprosy. They would tell you to rub it into other parts of your body to cure syphilis. The charlatans who have been making money off desperately ill and dying people has been around since man came out of the caves. And in our modern day enlightened times, there are not fewer of these people around, there are more of them around. And they become NLP practitioners, they become EFT practitioners. We've had one or two IEMTO practitioners, they're gone, by the way. I have a zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. And we'll see people all over the planet making claims where their herbal preparation will cure COVID, whether their NLP technique will cure COVID. Oh dear. These people should be shunned by everybody, named and shamed by everybody for the parasitic natures that for what they are. Let's be real. They are predating upon other people's desperation. They're predating on other people's fear, anxiety, and ill health in order to make money.
One last question. Sorry.
Does that
Yeah.
answer? It's not. I tend to get a little bit ranting and angry when I come across these people.
One last question, Andrew. Like, what's wrong in creating any relaxation music for, because it is obvious a lot of people are stressed when someone comes to know that just in my neighborhood someone got infected or here and there. So how about some relaxation music or some relaxation methods to ease the stress or anxiety? Wouldn't that work?
I would say there's nothing wrong with those things.
Yes.
However, this is what happens. So the causal relationship is built by NLP practitioners, particularly NLP practitioners, but I'm also seeing with EFT practitioners too.
Yes.
So they will say things like, we know the research demonstrates that stress affects your immune system. And so highly stressed individuals have immune responses that are not favorable to good health. And we also know that protracted long period of stress makes you vulnerable to lots of infections and cancers and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Now, that's well established. So now what we have is people reverse engineering that logic to say, so if I teach you to relax, then we're going to boost your immune response, therefore lower your chances of catching COVID-19. As a result of boosting your immunity, strengthening the immunity, you won't get cancer.
No.
And literally now what we have are people who will use this logic to say, if we help you relax and you remove stress, then you won't get ill.
No.
That is so false. That is so untrue. Here is what I was offering people. As you probably know, I had COVID. And during that time, I've still got
You
lung
have
cancer.
had COVID?
Yeah, and I still have breathing problems.
Okay.
During that time, I developed all the neurological syndromes. I had a minor stroke during my illness.
Okay.
And I was seeing people write this stuff. So I said I was writing directly to these practitioners and trainers who are making these claims. Are you saying then that I only got COVID-19 because I was stressed? Are you saying that it was my mindset that caused me to be ill? And you know what? They actually said yes. So now I was offering people on a regular basis, and people who follow me on Facebook will be familiar. I was saying to people, okay, if you think your technique of relaxation is going to bolster your immune system, if you think you can avoid COVID, come over.
Wow.
I'll make you a cup of tea, we'll have some cake, and I'm going to cough on you. And we'll film it, and let's see what happens next. And if you are correct, you will make a fortune, because the publicity you can get as a result will be significant. Because let's test it. Nobody came round. Nobody replied. All that happened was apparently I was being mean, I was being nasty, I was bullying people. Well, I was the one who was stuck in bed for 6 weeks, struggling with a lot of health issues. I think I had a right to be able to question some of the claims that these people were making.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for clarifying, because I was sad seeing all sort of claims, all sort of experts, not one modality. Like someone says my crystal heals, someone says my angel comes and heals. Oh my God! So that's where I wanted to ask you, and good to know that who has still having this breathing issues and who is recovering from COVID and who has reached out to those so-called experts and they did not get it back to it.
Yeah, they're not thankful. What I found, my observation is this: when you challenge people on these claims directly, what they're more likely to do is reinforce their belief. Presenting evidence or a counterexample to somebody's belief doesn't devalue the belief, it reinforces it. Because they dig their heels in and they come back with more passion to defend their belief. And so I have a little suspicion we're likely to see the following. You see, at the moment, only the minority of the population have been infected with COVID-19. Even though the numbers are huge on a global level, it's still only the minority of people that have got it. So the denial that an awful lot of these people who are practitioners are able to engage in is quite high, because they haven't had it, they don't know anyone that's had it, they've got no first-hand experience of COVID-19 themselves. And they're talking to other people who are true believers, who are also people who've had no first-hand experience. And so they're able to reinforce each other's beliefs. They're able to attribute, well, I'm staying well because I have the positive mindset. I don't have limiting beliefs. I have boosted my immune system. And so they reinforce each other. Here is my prediction. Over time, and probably over the next 6 to 12 months, a lot of those people are going to catch COVID. Now, a number of scenarios are going to happen because the COVID infection affects people in completely different ways. My wife is completely immune. She had 2 days of a very mild effect and then nothing, whereas I became very ill very, very quickly. And so we know that there's a wide range of effect that people have. Now, some of those NLPers or EFTers or any of the other alphabet therapists who only have minor effects, they will attribute the low level effect to their skill set of being a healer.
Okay.
Those who get it really badly are likely to take a narcissistic position where now they make the whole pandemic all about them, and we will never hear the end of them, as they constantly elicit sympathy and attention from everybody for how ill they are, because despite their mindset, this is obviously a very serious thing they're having to deal with, and we will hear how heroic they are in fighting this disease. Because what we're seeing with these healers, with the psychics, with the NLPers, with the tappers, this global pandemic is killing an insane number of people and will continue to kill a large number of people. And it's also going to leave a massive number of people with permanent debility in their health. It hasn't affected them, and they are not involved with it in any capacity. And yet they are the cure, and they have made it all about them. By claiming I can cure, I can boost immunity, I have just taken a whole global pandemic and made it all about me. Hey, look at me, I'm the one saving the world.
Yes.
And so what we're actually seeing is a very obvious manifestation of narcissism amongst these therapists, and we're seeing who's who, and they have revealed themselves with their claims. So I'm going to suggest that the people who are claiming to offer the crystal cure, the tapping cure, the NLP cure, the new code cure, what we're seeing is narcissism, because they're taking other people's suffering, other people's catastrophe, and making it all about them. The grandiosity is incredible.
Yes. So thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for, answering all my questions about IEMT, about metaphors, and also, sharing your own experience and helping people to be cautious from these so-called claims. And it's been really pleasure interviewing you, and I look forward to meet you in India when you come here.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting up, which hopefully will be soon, assuming we all survive, which I'm sure we will.
Yes, yes.
I'm crossing all my fingers.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, sir.